Welcome to Ryan's Running Reviews in partnership with Roadrunner Sports, and today we are comparing two Brooks running shoes that share a similar name. We have the Hyperion 2 and the Hyperion Max 2. Let's run with it. Before we get started, I do want to say these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports. However, no one had a chance to preview this video, and this file synopsis is my own. I'd also like to say please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. Both the Hyperion 2 and the Hyperion Max 2 fall into the same category within the Brooks lineup. They are up-tempo or fast daily trainers, really geared towards speed compared to things like the Ghost and the Glycerin, which are more focused on being all-around daily trainers. These two shoes really want to push the pace, and even though they fit into the same category, I do think they are completely different, as really the midsoles give you just very different experiences, and we'll go into the details because, like I said before, just very different shoes here. Something I do want to point out is the Hyperion 2 does come in a GTS or stability version. GTS stands for Go to Support. Brooks does this with a lot of their running shoes. Essentially, they will add guide rails towards the rear on both the lateral and medial side, which keeps your foot going the correct direction. So if you're someone who needs a lighter, faster daily trainer, but needs a little bit of guidance as well, you can definitely take a look at the GTS Hyperion 2. And I don't believe there is a GTS edition of the Hyperion 2 Max, which I already think is quite stable as it is. As far as the stats go, the Hyperion is the cheaper shoe with a price tag of $140 compared to the Max 2, which costs $180. Both of these options do get a little bit larger this year. Brooks added a couple more millimeters of stack height compared to their previous versions. Now, the Max 2 is going to be the thicker shoe, as the name implies. We have 30 millimeters in the heel and 24 in the forefoot for a updated 6 millimeter drop, while on the Hyperion we have 26 in the heel and 18 in the forefoot for a slightly higher 8 millimeter drop. Now, I got these numbers from the Brooks catalog. I do believe it does not include the insert in the outsole, so if you add those, it will be a bit higher, but according to Brooks, those are the official numbers with regard to the overall midsole height and drop. Even though the Hyperion 2 is the smaller shoe, it is significantly lighter, coming in at a very impressive 6.8 ounces, making it a crazy light daily trainer. While on the other hand, the Max 2 weighs 9.1 ounces, which is somewhat heavy for a plated tempo daily trainer. So kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to weight and stack height. Both the Hyperion and the Max have a very similar engineered mesh upper that has average breathability. It does fit true size, kind of has that classic Brooks fit and feel, with maybe the Hyperion being a little bit more snug through the midfoot. Now, the biggest difference between these two uppers, at least for me, was the tongue. On the Max, we had this knit material, which is really elastic and stretchy. It is a gusseted tongue that kind of hugs your foot when you slide it into the shoe, and I really liked how it felt on my foot. And then if we go towards the Hyperion, we have a more traditional gusseted tongue, very thin, some small foam blocks towards the top, which is not elastic at all. It doesn't have the same kind of hugging sensation on your foot that the Max provides. Now, it's not a huge deal. I think it works quite well, but if I had to pick one tongue or the other, I'm going with the one on the Max. And then if we go towards the ankle and Achilles section, the heel counter is much more stiff on the Max compared to the Hyperion, with similar levels of padding. Overall, I was really happy with the lockdown. Didn't feel like my foot was going anywhere. Again, a slightly maybe more snug fit on the Hyperion compared to the Max, but otherwise a somewhat similar experience with the exception of the tongue. The other small feature both the shoes have is the textured laces like we see on Brooks Elite racing shoes to try to kind of keep the laces from becoming untied. Didn't have a major issue with them, but I did think it was a nice small touch. The midsole experience between these two shoes is vastly different, even though they share the same kind of midsole foam, which is DNA Flash V2, which according to Brooks, it's 10% more responsive. And for me, as someone who had the Hyperion 1, I will say the Hyperion 2 feels noticeably softer and has a little bit more spring to it, has a more modern feel, if you will. And then if we go to the Max 2, like we talked about earlier on, this is the larger shoe, but it has exactly 4 more millimeters in the heel and 6 more in the forefoot. So if you are a forefoot striker, you might like this a bit more just because you're gonna have a little bit more foam directly under your forefoot. And then the big difference, or the biggest difference, at least in my mind, is the fact that the Max 2 has a full-length plastic plate, which Brooks calls their speed vault plate. You can actually see it in this little cutout on the outsole. And then you have this kind of mini stability wing on the lateral side, which really stiffens up the shoe and kind of changes the Hyperion Max 2's identity entirely. If you're not familiar with plated shoes, a plastic plate like we have here in the Max 2 is going to be a bit more flexible and less aggressive compared to a carbon fiber plate like we see in super race day shoes. Kind of acts as a nice bridge between more conventional daily trainers and those very aggressive carbon fiber plated super trainers and race day shoes. So who are these shoes for and what do they excel at? Well, in my opinion, the Max 2 is better for runners that want a little bit more stack height or just more cushioning in general for those longer runs, and for those that want a very aggressive rocker geometry. The full-length plastic plate gives you a very noticeable toe-off sensation compared to the Hyperion, which does not have a plate and is going to be just significantly more flexible in general. I'll also say it's great for runners that maybe want a more stable plated up-tempo trainer, mainly because DNA Flash V2, while it gives you a nice level of cushioning, isn't the softest or bounciest, especially when you compare to some other PIBA plated trainers. Now that means you're inherently going to have a more stable platform to run on. You also have some small foam sidewalls on the lateral and medial side, with the plastic plate kind of poking out on the lateral side, acting as a mini stability wing and just giving more stability overall. I was actually quite surprised with how versatile the Max 2 was. I used it on some easier efforts and pushed it all the way to race pace, and it did a solid job overall. The two things I will say is it's a little bit heavy at 9.1 ounces for its category, and for someone who wants a really soft and bouncy midsole, I don't think the nitrogen infused foam kind of meets that standard, again, compared to some of the PIBA midsoles that are out there. And then we have the Hyperion 2, which provides a completely different feel. This is a ultra lightweight up-tempo daily trainer, and in this age of super thick running shoes, I think the Hyperion 2 kind of brings it back to basics with a more moderately cushioned running experience. Now the DNA Flash V2 I think punches well above its stack height and for whatever reason feels slightly softer here in Hyperion 2 compared to the Max 2. I don't know if that's because there's no plate directly under my foot, but it feels a little bit squishier, and I do think this updated DNA Flash does a nice job of giving you a little bit more energy return, just feels much more pleasant compared to prior versions. The other big difference is this is a fairly flexible shoe. There's not a whole lot of rigidity to it, so for someone who does need some more support and guidance, you can either go with the GTS version or bump it up to the Max 2. And then if we go on to the outsoles, we do have some fairly smooth outsole traction patterns with a little bit more texture on the Hyperion compared to the Max. The one thing I will say is compared to more conventional running shoes like the Ghost and the Glycerin, you do have a little bit less rubber here and less substantial lugs overall. So these are better kept to more conventional surfaces, while I do think the Ghost, Glycerin, and more conventional trainers might work on a wider variety of surfaces. Well, that concludes the review. Let me know in the comments which Hyperion shoe you are going with and why. I would love to hear from you. I'm Ryan from Ryan's Running Reviews, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.